Thanks for starting your week with us. Hello and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Jiun in Seoul. Let's get started with a look at today's highlights. Global economic leaders agree that the world economy is recovering at a faster than expected pace, while calling on the need to carry out structural reforms. Korea is on its toes as the U.S. is set to release its list of currency manipulating countries as early as today, although chances of Korea being on the list appears to be unlikely for now. These stories and more coming right up. But first, let's start with a look at the markets. And for that, we have our markets contributor, Jemmy Kim, joining us on the line. Hello, Jemmy.
Hello.
All right, so could you give us a brief rundown of the market action today?
Sure. The markets were in quite a positive mode today. South Korean stocks started off strong and they maintained that momentum, ending at another record high of 2,480.05 points. The tech-heavy Kosdaq, however, closed 0.55% lower at 659.41 points. Analysts say the upbeat global investor mood is also apparent in South Korean markets. The Dow Jones, S&P 500, and the Nasdaq in New York had all hit new records last week.
Now, the Kospi has been on quite a run recently. So what's been fueling that extended rally?
Right. There was actually a bit of a lull when North Korean risks were becoming a major concern. But right now, it looks like the tide has turned. Last week, the Kospi registered several record highs. And also on a related note, so far this year, the total market cap of all stocks listed with the Korea Exchange increased by over 300 trillion won. The downside is that the growth was top-heavy, with 60% of it coming from the top four industrial sectors. However, there is still much growth being observed in the markets so far.
Now, this buoyant mood in markets across the globe also appears to be contributing to the rally here at home. So tell us what's going on overseas.
Right. In addition to a global market rally led by the U.S., which showed the largest retail sales growth in September since March 2015, uncertainties over rate policies in major central banks around the world are easing up as well. And analysts now forecast Chinese economic growth to pick up pace as well.
Can you also tell us about some important market events we have lined up for this week?
Sure. Tomorrow, the EU will be releasing its core CPI for September, while the U.S. releases its Red Book and industrial production. On Wednesday, the EU Extraordinary Economic Summit is scheduled, and the Fed Beige Book is due out as well. Thursday, China will announce its third quarter GDP, and U.S. initial jobless claims are due. And finally, on Friday, there's the EU current account for August, and Fed Chair Janet Yellen will end the week by giving a speech. This has been Jemmy Kim for Business Daily.
Global economic policymakers say the world economy seems to be on a firm recovery track now, posting stronger than expected growth. But they didn't hesitate to call for additional fiscal policies and structural reforms to keep this growth momentum steady. Our Oh Jung-hee has more.
The global economy is recovering at a faster pace than expected, but countries need to proceed with structural reforms to ensure growth is sustainable. That's the call from the world's economic leaders in a joint statement adopted Saturday after the annual meeting of the IMF's International Financial and Monetary Committee. The finance chiefs of 24 member states and representatives of international financial organizations agreed the circumstances may differ depending on countries, but in carrying out structural reforms, the priority should be enhancing labor productivity, expanding infrastructure investment, and getting rid of market barriers. They also called for the continued liberalization of trade, especially in the services sector. And with the emergence of fintech and digital currency and related possible risks, the world's economic leaders agreed the world system needs to guarantee fairness in competition while preventing winner-takes-all outcomes. Meanwhile, at the IMFC annual meeting, South Korea's finance minister Kim Dong-yeon introduced the new Moon Jae-in administration's economic policies focused on income-driven growth and more participation by women in the labor market. He also expressed the view that the impact of North Korea-related geopolitical risks on the South Korean economy will be limiting, considering the local economy's soundness. Oh Jung-hee, Business Daily.
U.S. Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen was upbeat in her assessment of the U.S. economy and inflation, cementing expectations of another rate hike at the end of this year. Speaking at a global banking seminar on Sunday, Yellen said low inflation had been a surprise this year, but expects a rebound in price growth as temporary factors begin to fade. She added that the U.S. economy has been growing at a moderate pace all year, despite the impact of recent hurricanes, while the labor market has continued to strengthen. Most economists are expecting the Fed to raise interest rates in December, with 3 additional rate hikes to come in 2018. China's producer prices grew in September at a higher than expected rate. The 6.9% on-year jump exceeded the 6.3% forecast in a Reuters poll. The gains were mainly driven by construction spending, including government-led infrastructure investment, as well as strong foreign demand for raw materials. The Consumer Price Index, on the other hand, matched expectations, rising 1.6% compared to a year earlier. China has seen strong economic growth this year, with the People's Bank of China estimating second-half growth of 7%, thanks to strong household spending. In China's richest cities, its poorest residents are still struggling just to earn enough money to buy food. And our Elliot Kim takes a look at how the Chinese government is trying to tackle this issue.
Wang Chen, a migrant worker living in Beijing, is illiterate, middle-aged, and poor. She earns about $227 a month collecting trash and reselling it. But despite working from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. nearly every day, she can only cover 2 meals a day for herself, her mentally ill husband who is unable to work, and her 10-year-old granddaughter who was abandoned by her parents.
When I started here, the monthly rent was 300 yuan a month. Now it's 700 to 800 a month. I can't pay it. Every month you still need to live. I still need to pay the school fees for the child and her food and drink every day. I can't take it. My whole body aches. I can't earn the money. I'm thinking about this every day. I can't look after the child. It's just me by myself. I can't do it.
Like many other migrant workers, Wang receives little to no assistance from the state, falling through the cracks in a system in which most of the benefits can only be collected in the location where they are registered. Alleviating poverty was one of Chinese President Xi Jinping's key pledges, promising in 2015 to lift the country's 70 million people living under the poverty line out of hardship by 2020. People like Wang earn above the government's $350 per year poverty line, but still struggle to feed and house their families. At the end of 2016, 43.35 million people were still officially below the poverty line. The government hopes to bring 10 million people out of poverty by the end of the year, a rate which would allow the government to reach its 2020 goal of eliminating major poverty. Government officials are upfront about the challenges. Funds are misused at a local level, and statistics on the poor population remain skewed and inaccurate.
These days, the country is stable. We're not afraid anymore. The rich and the poor can all eat. In the past, the poor starved. Now everyone has a meal and can go out and make money. In the past, even those who worked had nowhere to live.
While every day remains a struggle for those like Wang, others like Mrs. Zhang have taken a long-term view of the situation and remain hopeful. Elliot Kim, Business Daily.
The European Union is set to approve new sanctions against North Korea to punish the regime for its nuclear and missile developments. EU foreign ministers will meet in Luxembourg on Monday local time, where they're likely to impose an oil embargo and a ban on EU investments bound for North Korea. The new sanctions will add 3 North Korean officials and 6 businesses to a blacklist, subject to travel bans and frozen assets. The EU will also lower the limit on money that can be sent home by North Korean guest workers in the continent, whose work visas will not be renewed once they expire. And staying with North Korea, the regime has been suffering from a chronic shortage of electricity for years, with many parts of the country seeing power outages on a regular basis. But according to new reports, the power situation in the north is actually improving, despite a slew of new economic sanctions on the regime. Our Yoo Jun-hee explains.
The UN Security Council sanctions were expected to make life much tougher in North Korea, but the country is now generating more electricity than ever before. Ironically, this is being attributed to the global export ban on North Korean coal, forcing the commodity to be redirected to the country's coal-fired power plants.
We believe North Korea's thermal plants are receiving large supplies of coal since it can no longer be sold to China.
Pyongyang has also made efforts to upgrade and expand its power infrastructure, with a particular focus on hydroelectric generators. This may have also allowed the reclusive nation to restart factory operations at the joint Inter-Korean Industrial Complex in Kaesong, which was shut down by Seoul in February 2016.
We are aware North Korea is now running a small hydroelectric generator near the Kaesong Industrial Zone.
In recent years, North Korea has completed the construction of several hydroelectric power plants, the work on which started more than 2 decades ago. As a result, the country's total power output has grown from around 30 terawatts in the mid-90s to almost 43 terawatts in 2009. Pyongyang is also making efforts to diversify its power sources, aiming to generate more electricity from solar plants and renewable energy. North Korea has been buying large numbers of solar panels from its closest ally China at heavily discounted prices, as they are unaffected by international sanctions. Yoo Jun-hee, Business Daily.
The U.S. Trump administration is set to release its biannual report on what it views as currency manipulating countries as early as later on this Monday. Now, the widely held view is that Korea won't be on the list, but the possibility can't be entirely ruled out. Our Eunice Kim has more.
The U.S. Department of Treasury is finishing up its twice-yearly foreign exchange report. It could be delivered to Congress as early as this Monday. Exchange rates are a key variable in international trade, and U.S. President Donald Trump has singled out a handful of countries, including Korea, for allegedly manipulating their currencies to make their exports more competitive. But in its last report in July, the U.S. Treasury had only placed Korea, together with China, Japan, Taiwan, Germany, and Switzerland, on a monitoring list. Seoul is not expecting to be elevated to currency manipulator status this time. Korea's Finance Minister Kim Dong-yeon met with his U.S. counterpart, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, over the weekend on the sidelines of the G20 Finance Minister Summit in Washington, D.C. The Finance Ministry said it was clearly explained that Seoul does not intervene to devalue the won for the benefit of Korean exports, and that the Bank of Korea only moves to stabilize the currency market. As a matter of fact, Korea's trade surplus with the world's top economy has been falling as it imports more American shale gas. It came in just shy of $11 billion as of August. To be labeled a currency-manipulating economy, all three criteria of a $20 billion trade surplus and a sizable current account surplus and foreign asset purchases must be met. However, there are variables that could deliver a surprise in the coming report. As the Korea-U.S. FTA enters renegotiation, President Donald Trump maintains a firm grip on his vision of America first. Then there's the North Korea element. If over Pyongyang's provocations, tensions between Washington and Beijing rise, and the U.S. chooses to use the currency manipulator card against China, South Korea could be hooked in as well.
If tensions spike and we see a spillover effect on the economic arena, the question of exchange rates could re-emerge its head.
And while the worst-case scenario of being listed as a currency manipulator would only impact state-sanctioned businesses, Korea's economic delegation is working hard to make sure the world has a clear-eyed understanding of its sound economic fundamentals. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
Korea's ICT exports are stronger than ever. As latest government data showed, their sales hit another all-time high last month. A report from the Ministry of Science and ICT showed $19.2 billion worth of ICT products were shipped out in September, a 32.6% on-year surge. The boost was led by semiconductors, which spiked by more than 73% compared to a year earlier to a stellar $9.88 billion last month. Now, that was good enough to offset weaker shipments of mobile phones and phone components, down 16% from the same period last year. Korea's unemployment rate grew at the fastest pace in August among OECD member nations. Statistics show Korea's jobless rate at 3.8% as of August, up 0.2 percentage points from the previous month. It was among three other countries that saw a rise in unemployment, namely Austria, the US, and France, while the figure in Sweden fell 0.5 percentage points. Experts say Korea's jobless figure was mainly driven by growing youth unemployment, which jumped 1.3 percentage points on month in August. And employment season is here, which means job seekers here in Korea are striving to stand out amongst their peers to land their dream jobs. Our Lee Joo-young tells us more on what companies, both local and foreign, are looking for in their candidates.
A sea of prospective employees are suited up and networking at this job fair, hoping to land their dream job. Only what they have their eyes set on is to land a position at a foreign company, reflecting their belief that overseas firms offer higher salaries and a more relaxed working environment.
I'm hoping to work at a foreign company. I think it has good welfare and working environment for women.
Some 130 firms that participated in this job fair are set on recruiting a total of about 3,300 new employees until next year, most of them being interns and new recruits, followed by a relatively smaller proportion of experienced workers. The most important attribute to have? Roughly 91% say it's language proficiency.
The more fluent your English is, the more opportunities you'll have. That's why you need to be good.
Domestic companies, on the other hand, pointed out the candidates' job competency as the determining factor, moving away from measuring sticks that once placed high importance on criteria such as the applicant's place of origin, physical appearance, and educational background. Private firms like Hanwha and Lotte Group have also abolished internal aptitude tests and instead implemented other measures to better gauge a candidate's employment and qualifications.
Job seekers would be better off focusing on their job-related skills, knowledge, and experiences, and showing that on their cover letters and interviews.
With the year's second-half recruitment season well underway, desperate job seekers are hustling to land their dream job. Lee Joo-young, Business Daily.
There are a growing number of cooperatives here in Korea owed to an emerging trend in the field of arts and culture. And many of these young professionals are looking to further their careers by networking with others amid difficulties in finding permanent jobs. Here's our Cha Sang-mi with a closer look.
Behind the walls of this rundown house in southwest Seoul is the sound of acoustic guitar, the colorful garments of pantomime artists, and a crowd getting into the rhythm. This house concert is a part of this old neighborhood's restoration program, but it also serves as a bridge to connect underground artists with locals, most of whom have difficult lives. This concert is run by Beside You, a co-op of 10 artists with different talents. Since its inception in 2008 as a small library, Beside You has been working on numerous activities from publishing to consultation.
The best part about co-ops is that we can create a virtuous cycle where our meaningful work doesn't end. The first members grew into artists and are now fostering the second generation. We can tell our own story and it feels like we're dressed in perfectly fitting clothes.
The category of culture and arts covers a wide range of co-ops. Theater group Mangwon-dong Brothers is named after a play with the same name. Its 40 members, some actors, some producers, and some even professors, came together to continue performing the play.
In fact, not just actors and actresses, but staff are also out of work whenever a project ends. But since the Mangwon-dong Brothers co-op was formed, each member found their own identities. Despite our occasional fights, we are much happier within the co-op.
The government created regulations in 2012, giving a framework to culture and arts co-ops like indie music, modern dance, ballet, and drama groups. The number of co-ops related to culture and arts is on the rise. As of August this year, 428 of Seoul's nearly 3,000 co-ops, nearly 14.5% of the total, are registered under this broad field. The culture and arts category encompasses publishing, media and information services, as well as arts, sports, and leisure. And the head of Seoul Co-op Support Center says culture and arts co-ops have unique properties that make them different from other sectors.
There is a growing number of artists who visit our center for consultation. They often have precarious jobs. Establishing a co-op isn't hard, but since a co-op is considered a corporation, it has to generate revenues. And I think artists are often very talented but have strong personalities which put them off working together.
An expert in the field of co-op management says conflict between members is natural. The most important is how they get through it.
If they decide to form cooperative, they open their mind as cooperative members, and then they share their knowledge. And even if the conflict situation pop up, they should try to solve the problem all together.
When the members realize the value of cooperation and are ready to spread the value to others, they're finally ready to run a successful co-op.
We can't say how far our co-op will go, but since we are pioneers of this field, we feel a big responsibility. People around us are curious about how we are coping, and we ourselves wonder what the biggest force behind our bond is.
Not many pay attention to culture and arts co-ops since we are still just starting up. As they look at culture and arts co-ops from only an economic perspective, it's hard to get support. Even though we are all co-ops, I hope people will appreciate our value as art and support us.
Apart from the co-op members' efforts to come up with a business model and realize their self-worth, experts say that co-ops also need help from the outside. This help could come through government policies to help co-ops financially, from the private sector as part of their corporate responsibility, or from public support and awareness of the artistic work that co-ops do. Tae-sang-mi, Business Daily.
And that brings us to the end. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with more at the same time, same place with your Business Daily. Until then, goodbye.